joining us this morning from the UK. He's a writer, he's a campaigner, a holder of a CBE. He is an advisor to leading global companies on how to develop solutions to the climate and environmental crises we face. He's co-founder of the Aotearoa Circle, and we thank him for making himself available from the UK to talk to us, complete with the glass of red wine while we are all sipping our coffee. So, morena and good evening to you, Sir Jonathon Porritt. I shall hand over to hear from the global uptake. Thank you.
Vicky, thank you so much, and Larissa and all my colleagues in the circle. Kia ora. Lovely to be with you this morning. Yes, this evening for me, but so far I haven't really had a chance to drink my glass of red wine, so I hope I'm still vaguely coherent. I am very struck by the moment that we're in right now. I have a bit of a privilege here. I've actually been able to read the year in review for the Aotearoa Circle in advance. It doesn't actually come out until next year, I think early next year, because it's the review of 2023. But Vicky asked me to do a little commentary for that, or at least a quick statement for that. And when I was reading through it, I just thought, this is really quite extraordinary what's going on here with the Circle. And quoting from the two co-chairs, from Larissa and James, as they put in their introduction, the Aotearoa Circle is a unique partnership. There is no equivalent anywhere else in the world. Indeed. And what I went on to add to that is as follows. I hope that Vicky will allow this to go through the editorial process, which imposes a unique responsibility on all of us involved in the Circle to act urgently and creatively in ways that are commensurate with the twin nature and climate crises bearing down on us right now. And that, I suppose, touches several points for me, which is action is what really matters now. Personal engagement is what really matters now. An understanding of the nature of the challenge we face is what really matters now. So in my short commentary this morning for all of you, I want to address you all personally in a way, and to ask you to think what combination of emotions you're currently feeling when you think about you and your organization in this moment, not in some other moment in the past where you were personally or professionally 1, 2, 3, 4 years ago, whatever it might be, or where you're going to be tomorrow, which may not be the same as where you are today. But what's this emotional palette that you're looking at right now? And thinking about the amazing number of people on this call and the astonishing depth of experience and creativity that you bring to this involvement in the Circle, I'm thinking that it's bound to be a combination of trepidation, consternation about what is actually going on, fear in terms of what this really means for all of us in our different roles and different societies, a sense of excitement at the way in which this might oddly, even at this very last moment, open up the possibility to do things in completely different ways from how we've done them up until now. A deep sense, I guess, for some of us that this is now the point where we really have to come good about what it is that we've aspired to make happen in this very complex and contested world. And that, for me, is really crucial, because in the run-up to COP28, as you know, the 28th Conference of the Parties, which has done pretty much nothing from COP1 to COP28 other than put in place useful, but nonetheless not very influential international processes and agreements. in the run-up, we're all going to be asked to think very differently about what it is that's going on in the world today. And I really do mean very differently. So just yesterday, for instance, UNEP, which is obviously one of the UN's principal agencies dealing with this whole climate story, brought out its latest report about what is going on in the world today. It does this annual gap analysis on where we are and where we should be. And I'm just going to give you two quotes from that. I was reading it on the train coming back from London today, so I want to make sure I get this absolutely right. Two things just to remind you of what that gap looks like from a UN point of view. Firstly, where we are in terms of the production of fossil fuels. Currently planned production of fossil fuels by 2050, particularly from the main 20 oil and gas producing nations, is 350% greater than is compatible with our 1.5 degrees centigrade target, and 150% above that consistent with 2 degrees centigrade. So you probably know that a new report was published showing that all 20 of the largest oil and gas producing nations in the world, all of them without exception, have hugely ambitious targets to expand their production of fossil fuels, oil and gas in particular. And the second one, which we're much more familiar with, I think, because we've heard this now for the last 4 or 5 years, as it says, commenting on the nationally determined contributions from different countries over the course of the last 5 years or so, the current position that we have to report on now shows that to remain below 1.5 degrees centigrade, emissions must fall by 43% by 2030. As things stand, they are on track to rise by 9%. So that's the kind of gap that we get up every morning and confront. We should be heading towards 43% reduction by 2030. And at the moment, as of now, and given everything that governments have said they're going to do, let alone everything they have or haven't done, it's going to see an increase of 9% by 2030. It is quite something to have to get up every day and confront the nature of that gap. And then, of course, we've got what's happening in the real world, by which I do not mean the world of politics, by the way, and I certainly don't mean the world of the financial services sector or the investment world. I'm talking about the only real world that we have, which is, of course, our planet, what is happening on planet Earth today. And I'm not going to go into this at any depth, Vicky, rest assured, but you will know for sure that 2023 has been a year from hell. It is certainly going to be the hottest year ever until 2024, obviously. And we have seen climate records break or broken at literally every point throughout the course of the year, in pretty much every part of the world. And in many respects, scientists now are struggling, genuinely struggling, to find words to communicate with us and to our politicians the nature of what is actually happening out there. Not theoretically happening, but what is happening in real time to real people's lives in real communities with real impacts on our economy. And I'm more and more struck by this difference between the empirical database that we can now draw on with the importance, of course, the importance of the scenarios that we still have to use in order to track out what might or might not happen for different sectors. So we'll hear later in this meeting, we'll hear later about transport and energy scenarios, which the Circle has actually developed. But I'm really taken now by the fact that those scenarios are a pale shadow of what is actually happening in the real world today. So I'm not going to bang on and on about that. 2023 has been a nightmare. Rest assured, 2024 is going to be even worse. And that is for a number of different factors, but primarily because of El Nino, which of course started earlier this year, at least 6 months ago, and is now driving a whole process of climatic impacts, which will build through the first half of 2024, and leave us wondering at the end of 2024 exactly what kind of hell have we created for ourselves. That is my most apocalyptic prediction. I've got lots of other things to add, which I hope will help offset that, as it were. So I'm very struck by these physical tipping points. People talk a lot about the physical tipping points, and I am very focused at the moment on what I call the social tipping points. And those social tipping points are what really gives me a sense of hope for the future. And I just want to touch quickly on 4 of those in my comments. So the first is what I call a socio-technical tipping point. 3 reports in the last month looking at the role of solar power, solar energy in the world today, and basically all saying that within the course of the next 15 to 20 years, solar will essentially be the technology that outcompetes every other technology on planet Earth. And it points to one thing in particular, which is really interesting, and I'll bet all of us on this call have fallen for this little trap. It points to, these studies point to the fact that some people think we've now had all the innovation breakthroughs that we're going to get from solar. That is simply not true. We have a pipeline of amazing further innovation in solar, which will further transform the nature of this technology and further transform its contribution to energy futures all around the world, rich nations and poor nations, as you know. The second tipping point is one that I keep my eye on very carefully indeed, which is a kind of socioeconomic tipping point, which is what is happening in the insurance sector. The only bit of the global financial services sector that are actually really focused on real-time empirical evidence coming back from the planet is the insurance sector, not banking, and certainly not investment. But insurance are absolutely looking at what the implications of this are now in real time. And I have a very strong hunch that within the course of the next year, maybe 18 months, 2 years, we will see the insurance sector and the reinsurance sector take a starkly different position from the one which they equivocate about today. And that will be massive. Without insurance, there's no global economy, there's no local economy, there's no national economy. So once that bit of the financial services sector globally begins to remind people that this is now different from anything we've anticipated before, it'll be different. Thirdly, there's a lot of new thinking going on. I'm very conscious today that we are sharing this particular moment in New Zealand with the launch of a new initiative from Pure Advantage, Recloaking Papatuanuku, which is coming forward with a fantastically ambitious project, essentially, to persuade the new New Zealand government what it needs to do now to recloak Aotearoa with regenerated forests, with restored, repaired forests, to go for broke when it comes to using that particular nature-based solutions to the terrible degradation that has gone on in New Zealand for so many years. It's a wonderful document they brought out, which is, I'm sure, going to be shared imminently. And then lastly, my fourth, and maybe the craziest tipping point I want to offer you, because I bet many of you on this call share my frustration that you can't actually believe that so many people don't understand what's going on, just don't understand the true depth of the crisis that we're in at the moment. It's impossible sometimes to go through a normal day and think, why don't you get this? What is wrong with you? What's not happening? So my tipping point for this time next year, as we head towards COP29, is that there will be a massive breakthrough in enlightenment about an understanding of what really needs to happen. A kind of a tipping point of awareness that eludes us at the moment. It's always just there. It's always sort of on the horizon, but we've never quite been able to grasp it in the way that we want to. And for me, this tipping point is fascinating because it will essentially be the moment when we realize that setting the laws of physics, which is what determines what happens in the physical world, setting the laws of physics against the laws, quotes, laws of the market is suicidal, is literally suicidal. Physics is physics. It is a set of immutable laws that basically control or influence the life of every single organism on this planet. The laws of the market are not laws. They are temporary norms which have been developed over the last 5-6 decades, if you like, that would have you believe that those laws are the equivalent of the laws of nature, the laws of physics. Well, eventually that whole story is going to be busted wide open because the physics of climate change is different. The physics of climate change doesn't care about what is happening in the planet today. It doesn't do politics. It doesn't care about political egos. It doesn't care about the religious beliefs that people might have. It certainly doesn't call out all the naked emperors who preside over our lives today in so many different countries all around the world. And sadly, physics doesn't actually care about all the things that we care about. It particularly doesn't care about children and grandchildren and future generations and all that kind of stuff that goes with the rhetoric of sustainable development. It doesn't care about the gods that people worship or believe control their lives. It doesn't even care about money, and it certainly doesn't care about status. Physics is different. So for me, we're heading towards a moment where we will have to recognize the difference between the laws of physics and the notional, spurious, now increasingly damaging so-called laws of the market, which are not, as I said, they're not laws at all. The real question for all of us is, how quickly will that happen? How quickly can we make it happen? What can we do to encourage people to understand the depth of the illusion in which we're living? And how do we combine our professional experience and competence and our skills with our personal values, our passion for a better world, so that we can expedite this transformation in the way that it now needs to be expedited? So that's my thing. I'm absolutely certain that this is going to happen. If it happens by COP29, I'll be absolutely cock-a-hoop, as you can imagine. But I wouldn't mind it happening within the next 3 to 4 years. That wouldn't be bad either. So Vicky, I'll end there because I probably overrun my time, and I'm not sure that everyone was thinking that we'd be talking about the laws of physics. But anyway, there we go.
Thank you, Jonathon. I think always, yeah, the way you articulate what is happening globally to kind of give us that reference here in New Zealand and sort of reflect how so many people here are feeling as well is it's helpful to get all of that out, because so much of that sits in our heads and our hearts to understand. We have got a couple of questions, and I've been writing a few as well. Doug Paulin, CEO of Sealord, is on the call. Major climate events don't seem to be driving countries that are large emitters to make enough change. So what will?
Totally agree. It's absolutely astonishing to me the climate events, as you call them, the disasters that we're already seeing, have not had that impact. I guess that's why I went after the insurance sector, particularly in America, where you're now looking at climate-induced insured damage of at least $100 billion a year, and add to that the underinsured and uninsured damage to economies. And that's where I think change will come, because they can't go on any longer operating with their current business model. So that sounds bonkers. You'd think that people would look at these disasters and just say, yeah, okay, this is all the evidence we need. Now we need to change. That hasn't been borne out in reality, as you've said. So we need to think where the additional impetus of change is going to come. Politicians mostly around the world are driven more by money, I have to say, than anything else. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It just means they're thinking about growth and jobs and innovation and all the rest of it, balance of payments and cost of living and so on. So money speaks far more powerfully than morality, essentially, in our political world. And the insurance industry dominates that money equation.
It's interesting. One of the comments which I picked up from you this morning, which I don't always hear, but I am going to grab it, is a lot of people don't understand what is actually happening, what is impacting our economy. And you actually have kind of kept it to the economy, not actually what's happening to the environment and so on. And so I'm just sort of wondering, what is your challenge to business leaders if you're saying that the political world is not making those moves? What do you think business leaders here and on this call, but also around the world, need to do, I guess, with COP28 coming up, but, you know, the challenge that you would like to give?
Yes, thank you, Vicky. I'm constantly reminded when you look back at films or TV series about what life was like in the 50s, 60s, or 70s. And in the most astonishing way, everybody is smoking. And everybody is sitting there in rooms which are presumably just fogging up more and more with the tobacco smoke. And in those days, business leaders sat quite comfortably next to the business leaders of the tobacco industry, and they felt that they were all there contributing to the economic well-being of whatever country they were in. Only at a certain point did they realize that those leaders of the tobacco industry were intent on making money out of killing people. And at that point, most business leaders said, I'm not going to have anything to do with this industry, because this industry is tainted by its greed and tainted by its knowledge of the impact of its products. So my challenge to the business community these days is, when are people going to understand that the fossil fuel companies are the tobacco companies of yore? Today, 21st century, those fossil fuel companies are in exactly the same position. They have exactly the same knowledge of the degree to which their products and the expanded production of those products is going to be responsible for killing millions of people, far more than tobacco ever killed. And when are you going to stop sitting in rooms with fossil fuel company representatives because they are criminals? Now, it's a bit difficult in New Zealand because you don't have so many of them as we do here in the UK or in America or Europe or whatever. You may not have to spend too much time with the criminal class as it has now become. But trust me, that moment is going to come. That's a moral tipping point, not a social tipping point, a moral tipping point, when people realize that consorting with or having anything to do with this industry now contaminates your own sense of purpose and moral value. And I do think, Vicky, that people in business are going to have to start making judgments of that kind pretty damn soon.
You also commented, I think it was number 4 of your social tipping points, the fact that people, surprisingly to you, but just aren't aware. They don't seem to be aware of what is actually happening, that physics of climate. Why has that awareness eluded us until now? And you're really naming 2024 as this is going to happen. I believe that this is going to happen next year. Is there something that all the partners on the call can do to kind of hurry that along as well?
Possibly, but the root cause of this, and I need to be absolutely clear here, are utterly failing, underperforming politicians. In those countries which have had a really intelligent, compassionate, just debate about the impact of climate change and what we need to do about it, and there are a few of them, particularly here in Europe, where governments have gone out and invited their citizens to join in a proper discussion about what climate change means for them and what they need to do and what business needs to do and what we all need to do as individual citizens. In those countries, people do understand the nature of the challenge. They may be a little bit uncomfortable about some of the policies that are coming forward from those governments, but they get the fact that this is potentially an existential threat to everything that people care about in that country. Now, it's far too many politicians all around the world, and I'm certainly not going to mention either New Zealand, perish the thought, or even my own country, the UK, which has now become one of the most egregious recidivist nations in the world when it comes to facing up to its climate responsibilities. But without naming names, as it were, many politicians make it impossible for ordinary citizens to understand what the true nature of this crisis is really all about. So business can help a bit because they can engage with their customers, with their stakeholders, with their suppliers. They can be absolutely upfront about why we're doing this and how important it is to the net well-being of the nation in which each business plays its part. Of course, that's crucial. But ultimately, Vicky, sorry to have to say this, the ultimate responsibility lies with how politicians choose to articulate their responsibilities in this area. And we have a massive deficit in that regard all over the world.
So we're coming to the last question. And I'm going to ask it, but I'm also going to say, can you somehow, when you answer it, leave us with some hope in this answer? So a bit of pressure. Not only have you not heard the question, but I'm asking, can you give us some hope? You know, there's a lot of, if the work was hard a year or two ago, it's even harder now. So, we need something from you to keep us going. So just a question from Doug again. How do you balance the need to change with the cost to change? Because if there aren't any answers, and let's just sort of alternative fuels for some of the marine industry, if there are no answers yet, or the cost of those answers means you might go out of business. Tough last question.
Yeah, okay. So I'm all too mindful of the fact that this notion that the transformation is going to cost more than it's going to provide by way of economic benefits, that narrative is one that has been created by defenders of the status quo, by incumbent industries, by all those who don't want citizens to move because they're suddenly kiboshed by this fear that it's going to cost more money than it will save them. And actually, there's really not a lot of basis behind that. So I mentioned the Pure Advantage launch today, Recloaking Papatuanuku, which contrasts what it would cost to sequester a ton of CO2 by this amazing investment in forestry in New Zealand, $32 per ton of CO2, versus what it is going to cost New Zealand if it buys its offsets on the international market, which is at least twice that, and almost certainly won't bring the carbon benefits that you want. So when you have that kind of absolutely clear example of where the economic benefit lies, as well as the sustainability and the biodiversity benefit, then why can politicians not see their way around that? So I'm being a bit ungracious, but let us never forget the power of the incumbency. That means that most of the narratives that we hear, read, discuss, see on social media, these narratives are tainted by very powerful vested interests that have no interest in people actually understanding the real truth of it, which is why the responsibility, Vicky, why I stress this, the responsibility of us personally and in our businesses, in our organizations is enormous. We have to do what we can to correct that set of false narratives. By the way, that is not a negative comment, Vicky. This is a very positive thought. And I've been so positive about what's going to happen between now and COP29 at the end of next year. I can hardly face myself at the end of this session. So there we go.
Thank you, Jonathan. And look, thank you personally, because you make yourself available. You know, I email you, I ask to catch up with you. You come and talk to the board and you have sessions with them. We send large draft documents over to you to get, your comments and feedback and where can we push harder. So you do an awful lot for the circle from afar. So we just really appreciate that. And thank you for zooming in tonight. And I do hope now that you can sit back and have your glass of wine and enjoy your evening.
She'll be with you till the end of the session, Vicky. But yeah, we're enjoying the rest of it.
Jonathan. That's marvelous.